fancy people, welcome to the show. The following is a conversation that I had with my buddy, Justin Hadley. Now, Justin and I met several years ago at WPPI, and we hit it off right away. Why? Probably because we have this kind of strange passion for post-production. That's right, Justin and I both own our own editing companies. Now, naturally, having an editing company means that you talk to a lot of photographers who are struggling with their post-production, meaning that we get to hear a lot of things that photographers are doing wrong in post-production. So the following is a conversation about the 7 things that we've observed that photographers are doing wrong in post-production. Maybe you're doing a couple of these things as well. Now, specifically, we talk about why you shouldn't edit in Lightroom by the pool. We also talk about knowing your pace, how fast or how slow you happen to be when it comes to post-production. We talk about a lot of other things, and I hope you will enjoy. Justin, thank you so much for being with me. You know, some people might kind of wonder why I'm having a competitor have a conversation with me live on the internet. And I just want to answer that and get that out in the open right away. And the answer is because you're a very likable guy, and we've always had a great rapport.
Definitely.
So you have a competitive business. You're in the editing business as well.
Yeah, I don't like to think about it that way. I mean, it is what it is, but you know, I like to consider us friends and colleagues and above everything else. And so, you know, you sent people my way, and I've sent people your way, and it you know, there's enough for everybody.
Totally, I agree. And I agree that I don't even really like that word competition. I think that's just how people might classify it.
Sure.
You know, in general terms. But yeah, you have been a great person to bounce things off of. In our industry, it's kind of lonely. Not only as photographers do we tend to work on our own without an office and a water cooler to kind of gather around, but in the editing business, it's super lonely as well. There are not a lot of us to go around. There's lots of choices out there, but as far as like a group of business owners who own a post-production company, we're kind of few and far between.
Yeah.
So I think we got to stick together. And
I'm down.
Awesome, man. So let's talk about post-production.
Sure.
This is completely freestyle. This conversation was not planned out or, you know, scripted in any way, but I have 7 things that I think people do wrong when it comes to post-production. And this is kind of tongue-in-cheek. I'm going to maybe sound a little harsh with these 7 things, but I love you all photographers. Don't be discouraged. Take heart. These are to encourage you and help you. Okay, so Justin, I'm going to start listing these things off, and then I just want to get your take on it. So 7 things that you are doing wrong when it comes to wedding post-production. Some of these will apply to portraits as well, portrait photographers as well, sure. But for the most part, I'm talking to you wedding photographers. Okay, now Justin, you have experience shooting weddings also as well, right?
Yeah. My wife and I shot a few weddings a few years ago, and then we decided that it's probably better for the bride and groom to get photographers who enjoy shooting their wedding. So we decided to step away from that, and so we don't shoot them anymore.
Okay, cool. And I shot weddings for about 7 years, back in the early days, when film to digital was still a very big conversation, whether or not to switch to digital. And I actually, instead of switching to digital at that time, I got out of the business completely, started editing. So that's my story. So here are the 7 things that I think that people are doing wrong. I'm actually going to go ahead and list all of them up front, and then we can kind of go one by one. All right. So 7 things that you're doing wrong when it comes to post-production. Number 1, you're overthinking it. Number 2, you're over processing. Number 3, you're editing by the pool. Number 4, you're not using Photo Mechanic. Number 5, you don't know your pace. Number 6, you're not calibrating your monitor. And number 7, you care way too much. Okay, Justin, let's talk about number 1, overthinking it. Here's what I see. I'm just going to give you a quick bit, and I want to get your take.
Love it.
Photographers can be overwhelmed pretty easily by the sheer amount of presets that are available on the market.
Yeah. There's I think people can tend to get caught up in trying to find a look that they like and then making their photos look like that look. instead of maybe searching within themselves and finding what really is a true expression of their shooting style and who they are as a person, and then maybe finding a preset to complement that instead of being bearing all the brunt of the load.
Sure. And what I see also is that, among those presets, I love presets. I use them. I have a handful that I use on my own for my own stuff. But here's what I see. I see some photographers almost become paralyzed by this idea of like, oh, I could use this preset, but then I could use this preset for these images. And so they start thinking that they need to create, their batch of favorite presets, maybe 50 presets or something crazy like that. And then they start applying them one by one through a wedding, which is just going to be the most inefficient use of time ever.
Yeah, it's kind of counterproductive. It kind of defeats the purpose of using presets, because presets are supposed to simplify things and give you to a nice starting place that will make things easier on you, and not otherwise you're just editing each image with its own individual preset, and then you're wasting a bunch of time.
Exactly. Okay, so the point of that is don't overthink it. Find a good, clean preset that works for you as a baseline, and then build from there. Then you can adjust each image as needed when it comes to exposure and white balance and things like that. Any other thoughts on that idea of overthinking it?
Well, if you, I guess one thing to keep in mind is that when you have your style down, you can shoot with that in mind instead of using presets to correct. You're using them to it's more of an adjustment than a correction. You're not fixing the things that you've done wrong during your shoot. You're just finishing the process. You're shooting the first part of the process, and then the editing is just finishing off and making them complete.
That's a great point. I have heard a lot of photographers talk about how it pains them when a client says, oh, we can just fix that in Photoshop, right? I think that this is kind of the same thing, right? Like if you're going to do a commercial shoot, like let's say, for example, and your client says, oh, we can just fix that in Photoshop. That may be true. Just because you can fix it in Photoshop doesn't mean you should fix it in Photoshop. Why don't we adjust the garment or the background or the lighting or whatever it is that we need up front?
Yep.
That way there's less post work to do. And I think the same is true for shooting weddings. Obviously, there's a lot that's out of your control. You have a lot that's out of your control when you're shooting weddings. But, when you can have that level of control, let's adjust the capture for optimal post-production. That way we're not really fixing maybe mistakes or things that we overlooked when we were shooting. So that's just, the whole idea there is that I want people to remember is that when it comes to shooting weddings and you're going to deliver your 300 or 500 or 700 images, those are proofs. And too often people treat every single image, including that, grab and grin of the groomsmen at the party, they treat them like they're an image that's going to be on a billboard or a magazine cover. And it's simply, the sad truth is that most of those images are really, they're great to have for the memories, but they're not ever going to see paper.
You're not going to blow up a reception photo unless it's something spectacular. You're not going to blow it up bigger than maybe a 5x7, maybe an 8x10, but you're not going to see it very large. Take your, capture the memories, make sure it's exposed correctly. Spend a little bit of time on the lighting if you have that time, but don't fine tune those in Photoshop so much unless it's, you do get those standout reception images, but
sure. Few. And this goes right into the next point, which is your over processing. So I think we kind of already covered a lot of that too. I think that one of the problems that I see with a lot of photographers is that they rely so heavily on processing techniques that it overshadows their original capture. You know what I mean? I think that as a photographer, we should rely on our strengths as a photographer. That is the insight, the timing, the eye that you have for whatever moment that you're in. We should rely on that as our strength rather than what we can do in post-production. Have you seen, what would you say is the current over-processing technique right now, kind of the trend of the day?
Well, you'll always have, or at least since I've been editing past 5 or 6 years, it's a lot of that film look. You want to, make a digital image look like a film image. So you spend a lot of time crushing those blacks, making those blacks look real muddy, or adding that grain, making the split toning correct, making sure you've got the right camera profile, calibration profile down there. And instead of just making a timeless image that looks great and speaks to your clients and speaks to you as a photographer, that is a true expression of who you are, you can get bogged down in trying to fit in with the trend that's going on right now, and then you'll change in 2 or 3 years, and that's it. It'll be a goal that you'll never reach.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree. I think that the editing trends are fine. I don't really have a problem with editing trends. It's just that when people rely on that style to define their look.
Sure. And tastes change. There's nothing wrong with changing how you edit. I've done that several times. And I've had my clients influence the way I edit my own images. They'll tell me how they do something, and it's something. So it's a way to edit that I've never even thought of before. So I've learned from my clients, and I try to teach them as well. But you can spend all day editing an image and trying to get it just right, and there just comes a point where you've got to just accept it for what it is and make it the best it can be. But if you want to head swap every single group photo, then you're going to be wasting a lot of money.
True that, my friend. Okay, next point. Tell us what. Okay, so this is one thing that I see on Instagram a lot. I love Instagram, and I'm always on Instagram. I see clients, or maybe not clients, maybe just other photographers, posting those idyllic photos of them with their laptop by the pool, and I cringe every time that I see Lightroom on the screen. Justin, tell me, where do you edit?
In a dark room.
Exactly.
With walls painted light gray, so that I can minimize the color casts that are catching my eye and that are catching the screen, and everything's consistent always. It's real. Look, I will grab my laptop and I'll go sit by the TV sometimes, and I'll do some culling by the TV, where I can pay attention to my own work. But I'm never going to do color work with the lights on, without blackout curtains in front of my windows. It's really important to make sure that you are the only light the majority of the light that's hitting your eyes is from the screen, because you need to be consistent, especially if you're going to be going to print. That laptop's going to look different if you go inside. If you're under tungsten lights, if you're in the sunshine, it's going to change constantly.
Exactly. So our human sight is so easily tricked, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So when you're sitting by the pool and it's super, super bright and sunny behind your laptop, maybe even really warm colors, and a lot of green colors or whatever might be around, that influences the way that you're perceiving the color on your screen.
Absolutely.
And I get it. Okay, so I just got back from a trip to Fiji where I was the photographer for a medical team. So I was shooting all day, both video and stills. And when I went back to the hotel, of course I wanted to sit by the pool and edit. And I would, just for culling, as you said, just for culling. But I would not do color out by the pool. It's just, you're taking too many chances. If you want consistent color, you want a consistent look, you have to edit in a consistent environment and a controlled environment.
I'd imagine you could take like a black beach towel to the pool with you and just kind of, Ansel Adams it and cover up might defeat the purpose, but that's the only way.
I know. So point taken here. Culling by the pool is okay, but not color. Please do that in a controlled environment. I guess that also goes to the fact that I've seen a lot of creatives who have a beautiful office and they've got, an amazing turquoise wall or something behind their computer. And that's amazing and it's inspiring and it's great, but
calming.
Calming, but it's also affecting your perception of color. So if you have a colored wall behind your monitor, it's going to change the way that you perceive color. And that means that you're not going to get consistent results, because time of day, lighting from your window and things as they change, your color temperature is going to change in the room like that. So keep it controlled as much as possible. I know that's kind of geeky and kind of boring. A lot of people are probably going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
But you know what? Sitting in that dark room for so long, going to the pool would be a nice reward and a great break. And then enjoy it for a little bit, and then do a little bit of work and
good point.
Fully enjoy the pool. Don't work at the pool. That's the worst.
I know, right? Wouldn't you rather just go swimming?
Yeah.
Okay, so next point. So we were talking about culling by the pool. If you are going to cull by the pool, I think there's really only one choice when it comes to culling. And the mistake that I think a lot of people make, number 4 that I have here, is that you're not using photomechanic. Now, Justin, you and I have not talked about this particular thing. What are your thoughts on photomechanic?
I personally don't use it. I'm not against it. I have used it before. And it's incredibly fast. But I tried to start using it after I had my kind of muscle memory down for Lightroom. Sure. And I do a lot of editing with smart previews, which, as far as I know, can't be pulled into photomechanic.
Exactly.
So the benefit of photomechanic is that you can run through those raw files without loading the full previews. You can really just fly through those large thumbnails. I mean, they're essentially large thumbnails, right? They're full screen, low data previews, and you can really fly through those images in cull. In Lightroom, you're going to have to, it's going to want to process that preview every single time. It's going to slow you down. So as far as I know, you're processing, raw files. I would definitely use photomechanic.
Yeah. So you brought up a great point. If you are a photographer who uses an editing service for culling, photomechanic's kind of out of the question, but it's actually it actually really doesn't matter, right? Because they're sending it off to be culled. They're paying someone else to do the culling. And so that's one aspect of it. If you're doing your own post-production and you are creating a catalog, well, either way, if you're doing your own post-production and you're doing culling, I think the best way to do it is in photomechanic first, and then you only import the images that you want to keep into your Lightroom catalog. For most of our clients, they do their own culling, and then they just send us a catalog of their keepers, of their favorite images from that wedding. And so in that case, it works perfectly. However, you are right, with smart previews, they would have to unfortunately just load everything into Lightroom and wait for everything to render the smart previews, which, is not really any overhead. They just let it load and go make a sandwich or go do emails or whatever else, and it'll work in the background.
And I would say another benefit of using photomechanic as the first step is that you want to keep that catalog as small as possible, because if you have that full of all of the images that you're not using, it's just bogging it down and slowing it down. So you're doing yourself a disservice by keeping all those images in there you're not using.
For sure. Okay, good one there. Number 5, you don't know your pace. And again, another topic that you and I haven't talked on, but when I first started editing, I realized that I was basically getting paid exactly the same, whether this job took me 2 hours or 10 hours. And so I quickly began to literally take notes. I put a pad of paper right next to my computer, and I started detailing exactly how much time it took me to do every step of the process in post-production. That way I knew what I had goals then. I had hard data on exactly what I was capable of doing. So in other words, I knew that it might take me, 3 hours to do color correction for 500 images or whatever. Well, once I knew that number, there was a couple things that happened. One is I could predict when jobs were going to be completed when I was doing the editing on my own. And then I could also get competitive with myself. When I knew the number,
I know what you mean.
Like I was like, oh, I want to get a personal best on this one. I want to beat that number. I want to get a better average. So here's what happens. I ask a lot of photographers, how long does it usually take you to edit let's say 500 images, and nobody knows. Nobody really knows, honestly. Yeah. Nobody keeps track of it. But I think it's one of the most powerful things, and it's non-techy, it's non-geeky. You don't have to go take a Creative Live course on Lightroom to figure this out. Just get a timer and get a pad of paper or a spreadsheet or whatever, and start logging your time and figure out exactly how much time things take you. The other thing it does is it helps you focus, because when you have a timer on, you want that time to be accurate. So if you have the timer on, you're less likely to be distracted by Facebook.
Yeah, it's a little bit of self-accountability.
Totally.
Yeah. So what is your pace?
What is my pace? I could, now here's what's cool. With culling, I've always been notoriously bad. I just don't enjoy culling, honestly. But I could get up to about, like, at least on my own stuff, I know that I can cull about 1,000 images in an hour. At my height of me editing, and I say that because for several years I've been out of editing. I've been out of the editor's chair, I should say. I've been running a business, creating a team of editors. So I'm managing a team of editors, and I'm doing less editing. But however, when I was in the editor's chair, I could edit 300 to 500 images per hour for color correction. But I held my editors to a much lower pace because I didn't want them to burn out. And I wanted them to have a real sustainable number and a realistic number to hit. So in the beginning, they would start out at sometimes, maybe as low as like 100 images per hour. But it was great to know that number, because then I could show them how we could get better and better and better.
Benchmarks are amazingly inspiring.
They're super effective. Because I've heard this phrase and I love it, and I use it all the time, probably overuse it. If you don't know the score, you can't win the game. And I feel like knowing your pace is knowing the score. So for most photographers who are going to do their own editing, if they knew when they came home from a shoot that they had X number of images they had to cull and X number that they were shooting for as the keepers, if they knew that ahead of time, then they would know how many hours they're going to need to carve out in their schedule for that job. So that's my thought on it. It's totally low tech, but I feel like it's one that has the highest yield when it comes to efficiency.
I totally feel that competition with yourself. There's nothing quite as satisfying in the world of editing. Very few things are incredibly satisfying. One of the things that is incredibly satisfying is when you finish a job really fast. And you are watching that clock, because I have a little app on my computer. It's called Howler Timer, and what it does is it keeps a little timer going up in the pointing like everyone can see in the little menu bar at the top of your screen, where it shows how much battery you have and your Wi-Fi and all that. It just keeps a timer going, so I can glance up very easily and see where I am, switch back to grid mode, which image number am I on? And then I can really oh, wow, I'm really burning through this job. And I'm like, gotta keep going with this job. And, or maybe I got a little distracted with emails or Facebook or something. And then well, I need to pick up the pace here. This is ridiculous. But I totally feel that.
Cool. Next one on the list, number 6. This one kills me, Justin. I don't know how this is even possible to be a professional photographer and miss this one consistently. Number 6, are you ready? You're not calibrating your monitor.
For shame.
Okay, so there are probably people listening or watching who are saying, well, what's calibrating your monitor? In short, when you get your computer, it might have been calibrated. I don't know. It may have been calibrated, meaning that it's showing you true color. When you see a blue on screen, exactly, in quotation marks. When you see a blue on screen, it's a true blue. When you see a white or a black shade, then it's truly neutral and no other, color influence in that color. But the problem is that all monitors stray over time. Every single monitor on the planet will, even if it's calibrated today, is going to stray over time. Heat, environment, those types of things can all affect your the color being displayed on your screen. And I can't tell you how many times, Justin, I've talked with a client who said, hey, this job that you guys sent back, things look a little warm. Can you guys redo this for me? And, the answer is always yes, of course. Sure. However, one of the questions I always ask them is, hey, have you calibrated your monitor in the last 30 days? And it's frightening to me how many people say, well, I think I calibrated it when I got the computer. I borrowed my friend's, my friend. Calibrated. Yeah, it came calibrated. Right. No, but I get my prints and they match perfectly. I'm going to argue they don't. I'm going to argue that you want them to match perfectly, but they really don't. Now, I come from a pro lab background where calibration happened every single day. We ran test strips on the paper. Mm-hmm. Everything was highly, highly measured. And so that's why I think I have such a reaction to this, because I saw what we had to go through in the print lab industry, in the pro lab, print lab industry. And to see so many photographers struggling with color and know that they're not calibrating their monitor, to me, it's just painful. I feel like, and I said this before on a previous podcast, I feel like when you apply for a business license as a professional photographer, your license should arrive in the mail packaged with a calibration device.
Sure.
Talk to me, Justin. What do you think? What do you see?
No, I'm totally on board. And it's incredibly crucial, especially when it comes to outsourcing your post-production, because you need to make sure that what you're seeing and what your editor is seeing are the same. You can't give accurate feedback. But part of the conversation that I have with new clients especially is that the process of describing color and editing images is incredibly subjective. You can't prove to me that this isn't too bright. You know what I mean? And so if 100%. If you're sending me this image, or you like to say these are just too warm, and I look on my end and I'm like, well, they don't look too warm to me. Mm-hmm. There's no way I can tell you you're wrong.
Sure.
But and I'll always make it warmer. You want it warmer? No problem.
Right.
But the issue is that if you're not calibrated, you're not giving me accurate feedback. And if you're not, and then on the when it comes to prints, you have your monitor, which is projecting light to you, and then you have a print which is reflecting light. Mm-hmm. You need to make sure, if you're really comparing your monitor to your print, that you're looking at your print in the right light.
Exactly.
Because if you take your print into the kitchen, if you take it outside, it's going to look different.
Totally.
And so I think a lot of people don't really know yet how to compare your print to your monitor.
Right. Yeah. And I tell people, we calibrate every Monday, but that's because we're an editing service. And I think that, it's good to be on top of that and be obsessive over that. But I think for most photographers, calibrating once a month is probably at least as much as you need to do. If you do it every week, great. But
yeah, I mean, you can't over calibrate.
Totally.
It's just your before and after is going to look exactly the same.
I am always amazed, though, even on our side, how when we calibrate, even every Monday, we still see a slight change in the before and after.
Yeah.
So that just goes to tell you, even though we calibrate every week, we're still seeing slight changes. Now, and again, just to kind of maybe give a little peek behind the curtain for some of those people who are brand new to this idea of calibrating, I grabbed one of the devices that I like to use. I use a Spider 5 Pro. There are lots and lots of devices out there. Usually the more expensive ones have greater features like calibrating a projector or TVs and stuff like that. They have, more extensive software. For most photographers, you don't need to blow the bank on a calibration device. I think this one may have been, I don't know, under $200, I feel like. But essentially, just so, people at home can see, those who are watching, all it is this little device. A little USB device that you plug into your computer, and then you hang this on the monitor. And behind these little dots is a big sensor, and it just reads the color that your monitor is displaying, and it measures that color. So it knows, in other words, exactly what those color swatches should read numerically. And it reads the color that it's actually putting out and figures out the difference, and then adjusts it so that your whites are truly white, your blacks are truly black, and any gray tones are perfectly neutral as well. So that's it on monitor calibration. I think it's just, you have to do it. If anything,
I would maybe even take it a step further, and if you can,
mm-hmm.
always edit on a desktop monitor and not your laptop.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because your laptop can change depending on the angle that the screen may be at.
Mm-hmm.
It can look very different. And so if you have a large screen that's in front of you, you have a lot more a bigger surface of light that's coming to you, and so you're gonna see it more evenly, and it has less of a tendency to vary in terms of light output and color across the screen.
Exactly right. And I think for the most part, every desktop will typically have a wider color range, a wider range of colors that can be displayed on screen. And laptops are usually, I know they're getting so much better these days, but laptops are usually a little less number of colors that can be displayed. Whether or not our eyes can see that difference is another debate. But anyway, you're right. A desktop computer or desktop monitor would be much better. Even if your main machine is a laptop, get a nice monitor that you can use for doing your editing, and plus you just get more screen real estate that way, and you still have the portable option as well. Last point, number 7, and that is that you care way too much. This goes to a point that we made earlier about the grab and grin of the groomsmen at the reception. I see people laboring over images. And once you, by the way, related to number 5, knowing your pace, once you know your pace, you can just do the math and kind of figure out how many seconds do I need to allot for every image. And so when I say that people care way too much, this is exactly what I mean. They'll take an image that is, maybe it's not a highlight image from the day. It's an image from the day. Maybe there's an important element to it, but they spend so much time editing that image that they're putting themselves behind. This is an image that is never going to become that Facebook profile picture or become that award-winning print that you show off at WPPI or something like that.
Right.
You have to pick and choose. I think that when it comes to knowing your pace on editing, part of that is knowing that you're going to spend more time on the portraits and the ones that are really your best shots of the day.
Right.
And when it comes to some of the other shots, you have to know that, hey, if you're like 80% on this image, that's going to have to be good enough, because people are going to look at this image for what it is, and they're going to pass. They're going to go to the next one. So care about your image editing, of course, care about it. But remember that if you're in the proofing stage, you can't care about these images as if they're going to be the final print that goes on a building wrap or something like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on what you see with your clients or other photographers out there?
No, I totally agree. I think photographers, they can have a tendency to be a little bit too precious with their images. It's a representation of them that they're going to be giving to their bride and groom. They want them to be as good as possible. I totally understand that, but I will say that one of the benefits of outsourcing your post-production is that you have a pair of fresh eyes looking at your images who can look at it objectively. They look at these images all day, every day, and no one's going to see as many flaws in your images as you are.
Sure.
And so these things that you're laboring over, somebody else might not even see them. You might be working way too hard on these images for something that nobody's going to notice.
Exactly.
So having someone, outside of yourself, taking a stab at them, it's generally to a benefit to maybe take it a little step back and not be so precious with, especially those grip and grins that you were talking about.
I like to tell a story about when I first got started in the printing business. I worked at a little camera store, a little mom and pop place, and they had a lab, a mini lab in the back. Anytime that I would have prints done for myself, whether they were either a professional gig or they were just fun prints of, you know, friends or a vacation or something, the lab manager would usually come to me and he would lay out 6, maybe more prints for me on the counter, and he'd say, which one do you like best? And I look at him and I just go, man, I don't really see a difference between any of these. Now, keep in mind, I'd been working as a photographer already for almost 8 or 9 years at that point. Mostly my experience was working in a black and white darkroom. However, I had been shooting weddings at that point, and obviously I was working in a lab. And I was helping clients, helping customers with their prints and everything. So I was seeing a lot of color prints, and you'd think I would be able to see the difference. But, you know, when I told him, Mark, you snarky little guy, when I told him I couldn't see the difference, he just like, oh, you know, he just like get frustrated with me. He just go magenta, green, brighter, darker, you know, and he just pointed out to me. I go, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of see that now. So it took me a while, even though I was in the business, it took me a while to be able to see that stuff instantly. So I like to tell my clients this story because it's to remind them that when your bride and groom look at these images, they will never notice that 50 points of magenta or, you know, 500 points of yellow or something like that. It's such a subtle difference to the bride and groom that
it's hard to convince people of that sometimes too. You know,
I know
that preciousness just really takes hold, and you know, I think some people can maybe feel a little less professional because they're not, you know, being so precise with their images, but it's tough. But yeah, I mean, you're totally right. They're never going to see that.
And, you know, to make it worse, I see so many photographers talk about how their clients swipe images, they screenshot images, then they put all these Instagram effects on them and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe the general public is a little more educated on editing styles and, you know, filters and stuff like that nowadays than they used to be. But, you know, it's just to remind people that when they're editing their images, at least for the general public, they're probably not going to be able to see that difference. So if you're going to take 3 minutes to really dial in the white balance, and you're really laboring over it, and it's this big decision for you, like, oh, should I go a couple more points this way or a couple more points that way? Is the contrast, should it be at 10 or should it be at 12? You know, where's my clarity? Should my clarity be at 13 or 12? You know, like those are decisions that really never translate well and never really give you a great reward when it comes to the final client seeing the images.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine them saying, well, you know, this is really beautiful. It's just literally 2 points too green.
Right. The bride and groom are looking at those images. They're looking at the capture of emotion, the timing.
Yeah, they have their own glasses on.
Exactly. They have their own glass, their own filter on when they see those images. So anyway, I like to remind my clients of that because I feel like most photographers put their expectations so high on their post-production, but their client's expectation is pretty low when it comes to that. I mean, obviously there's a standard that you've got to hit, but I feel like most photographers put their standards so high that, you know, if they were to bring it down a little bit, no client would ever even notice because their expectation is already so much lower when it comes to specifics on color and contrast and overall brightness and stuff like that. Yes, be consistent with your brand, be consistent with your look. You know, a lot of people tell me like, oh, well, my clients hire me because of my look. Great. That's fabulous that you have a recognizable brand. There's a difference between what goes on your website, which is, you know, perfectly polished. Yeah. Exactly. And what you're delivering as proofs. So there you have it. The 7 things that I think most photographers are doing wrong when it comes to post-production. Justin, one of the reasons that I've always enjoyed talking with you is because, you know, I feel like we share a lot of the same viewpoints on the industry and post-production, and I'm really grateful for your insight today. Any parting thoughts on post-production that you want to put out there?
I just, you know, as a business person, you got to just, weigh your time and, what your time is worth. And it's a post-production. It's an important part of the process that it's, you're a business person as a photographer. And so it's a consideration that you need to make as to whether or not you do it yourself or you find, someone you trust to do it. And I think you had some really great questions that addressed a lot of the questions that, people should be considering when they think about post-production.
Sure. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
I really always love talking to you.
I know. And, as many times as we've talked on the phone, I always felt like when we hung up, I'm like, man, I wish we had that on record because that would be great content for others to hear as well. So anyway, hope you all have enjoyed. And Justin, thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you again, my man.
I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
All right. Take care.